Do you know what manufacturer needs a Formula One team, a sports car team, or some sort of other racing team? That's right, Mini. Now, why I say this is simply I found their first driver and engineer. The British Motor Corporation first sold the Mini under their two primary brands, Austin and Morris, until it became its own marquee in 1969. Well, Brendon Hartley's middle name is Morris, named after the original brand name. His father is a champion racer in Minis in New Zealand. His brother has land speed records in a Mini, and Brendon owns a 1967 Cooper S he loves. He has a wide breadth of talent and experience. Mini runs in his blood, and his brother is even a racer and engineer. So he would be the perfect on-track or off-track representative for the brand. Plus, how sublime would it be hearing Crofty say it's a Mini front row lockout, or Heimdall call the Mini prototype taking the overall after a grueling 24 hours of Le Mans. Brendon Morris Hartley was born on the 10th of November 1989 in the New Zealand North Island city of Palmerston North. Palmerston North has a population north of 80k in the beautiful Dugald Mackenzie Rose Gardens. However, it has been described by English Monty Python actor John Cleese as a great place to encourage depression. 200 years ago, communities of Maori referred to the area as Papaiʻoea, which is believed to mean how beautiful it is. And this is the definition I assume Brendon prefers. He always enjoyed growing up there and especially loved mountain biking, not to mention this is where he and his family based their motorsports-centric lives. Brendon was pretty well destined to be involved in motorsports. His mother Linda used to be a hobby racer and was once even a Manawatu car club champion. His father Brian raced everything he could get his hands on, and his 4-year older brother Nelson, named after Nelson Piquet, led the way when young into karting and then Formula cars, and still races sprint cars. The family not only revolved around racing, but mechanics and engineering. For more than 40 years, the Hartleys have supported their racing with their father's engine building business, Hartley Engines and Motorsports, which is now spearheaded by Nelson. Hartley Engines have built custom engines for race cars all around the world. All 3 family members worked at the small shop that only has a handful of employees. Father Brian honed his engineering skills building engines and cars to support his own racing habit through the late 70s, 80s, and 90s. He made it to the track often by buying previously wrecked cars, rebuilding them, and then tuning the engines to perfection. He was a 2-time New Zealand champion in saloon cars on dirt, 2-time Mini champion, raced in Formula Holden against the likes of Greg Murphy and later Mark Webber, as well as racing in Formula Atlantic. He ran his racing on a tight budget, but said during those days it was different and was still possible to find some success. When his son Nelson turned 6, he started racing karts, and when Brendon was 5, their father would stop his racing in order to put all the funds and time into supporting his sons as best he could. While there was never a lot of money, there was a lot of knowledge. The Hartley family was always at a racetrack. Even before karting, Brendon was either at school, in the shop, or at a track. His family enjoyed spending time together racing. His earliest memories were at being at the track and watching his father race. Even when he was at home, he says he had a VHS tape of his father winning a mini race that he loved to watch over and over. Brendon first started racing karts at age 6, but even before this he was always competitive. He says he vividly remembers his first race. It was one of the few times he would compete against his brother, and the day before in practice, he found his more experienced brother was much faster. When they returned home, Brendon kept scrutinizing both karts, knowing there had to be something better on his brother's. He expressed his displeasure to his father, confident that Nelson had better tires, gears, a better engine, something. Of course, nothing was out of the ordinary, and in his first race, Nelson would inevitably lap him. It was this weekend Brendon realized that I can't lose. I want to win in everything I do. Fortunately for Brendon, as Nelson turned 10, he would graduate the cadet class and move to junior karting. Brendon, on the other hand, would stay in the local WPKA Gold Star Series and win 4 consecutive cadet class titles. He recalls an embarrassing story when accepting a karting award. He would go on stage, show off his Jean Alesi shirt, and tell everyone he was going to be an F1 driver just like Alesi. Even at a young age, Formula One was Brendon's dream. His father drove number 28, Nelson used 28, and Brendon was number 28, just like his favorite driver, Alesi. However, Brendon does like to point out his success early on wasn't purely because of his own talent. He says he was very lucky to have a mechanically inclined father and brother who spent 4 years perfecting the setup of each car, so by the time Brendon was old enough, he got to reap the rewards straight away. Not to mention their father would spend late nights in the shop getting every last horsepower out of the engine on the dyno. He does say he also knew how to get his hands dirty and would change tires, gearing, and engine components, but if you ask his family, they would say he didn't know how to hold a screwdriver. After age 10, Brendon would move up from the cadet class of karting into the junior class for a few seasons. Thanks to the Motorsport NZ junior driver's license, Hartley would be qualified to race cars at age 12. After this, participation in karting was more sparse, but he would still go on to win the National Schools Championship title in 2005 for Palmerston North Boys High. His first year in single-seaters would come in a cheaper Formula V style car in the 02-03 New Zealand Formula First Championship. The following year, he would venture into Formula Ford, taking over the car previously raced by his brother. It started well, with him winning his first race at the nearby Manfield circuit. He'd go on getting 6 poles, 9 podiums, and the most victories in the series at 6. Brendon says he should have won the championship, but he made stupid choices, getting involved in incidents on track that saw him finishing second at year's end. At this point, Hartley had the support of his family and members of the NZ Motorsports Spear, Peter Johnson and Kenny Smith. However, in 2005, his name would become more known worldwide as he would win the first race in the new Toyota Racing Series. But as the season grew on, he was in need of sponsorship support. Advisor Ken Smith got Helmut Marko's contact information from American driver correspondent Jeremy Shaw and suggested they send him an email. By the end of the year, Brendon would finish 4th in the standings with 7 podiums, 3 victories, and an email response in the form of a contract. If he came to Europe for a test session and things went well, the contract would be signed and he would become part of the Red Bull driver development program. Before the time for the test, he would also complete 12 rounds in the next season of the Toyota Racing Series, getting a victory and 8 podiums.
Yeah, I've got to put it on pole and win all 3 races, really. So that's what that's what we're aiming to do.
During his time in school, Brendon said he was always good at mathematics and enjoyed it. Conversely, he was pretty poor in language and geography, and now he was about to go to a motorsports test in a place he couldn't find on a map. However, in order to venture to Portugal, he would have to miss his end-of-year exams at school. His parents pretty quickly agreed the best choice was to screw exams and head to Estoril. Brendon had talent, and getting the attention of Red Bull could have been his only option to continuing on. At the test, 20 drivers were being evaluated, and Brendon was one of the 4 selected to join the academy. As scary as it was for both he and his parents, in 2006, age 15, Brendon moved to Oschersleben, Germany, living with fellow Red Bull juniors outside the Oschersleben Motorsports Arena. He recalls having so much to learn about life and other cultures, and he had a pretty bad homesickness. There wasn't a whole lot of successes on track. He participated in the Formula Renault 2.0 Euro Cup and Northern European Cup, getting a podium in Sweden. He would start seeing success the following year after joining the Epsilon Red Bull team, finishing 3rd in the Renault 2.0 Italian Cup with a victory, 5 podiums, and a pole. In the Renault 2.0 Euro Cup, he would win the championship with 4 victories, 8 podiums, and 6 poles. In 2008, he would finish 3rd at the Macau GP, do 8 races in the Formula 3 Euro Series, and finish 3rd in the British F3 Series with 5 poles, 11 podiums, and 5 wins. Earlier in the year, Hartley would do a demo run in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia in the Red Bull F1 car, and then go on to do the initial test of the 2008 Toro Rosso. He remembers the power difference between F3 and F1 to be astounding, plus much more physically demanding, and he wasn't fit enough yet. Then again, he and Sebastian Buemi would fill in for injured Mark Webber at the end of the year test at Jerez. In 2009, Hartley was announced as the reserve driver for both Red Bull and Toro Rosso. He was racing the F3 Euro Series, and at last minute, with no testing, was put into the Formula Renault 3.5 Series. He says his experience in the Red Bull Academy was being put into any role you were told to fill. He was going to all the F1 races, the simulator, and the 2 racing series. He got a few poor results, started losing confidence, and generally felt like an extra wheel being drug around by the F1 team. He started to lose some love for motorsports, and it showed in his results. Across the year, only 1 pole, 2 podiums, and a victory. The next year, he was still in the Renault 3.5 Series and was a test and reserve driver. However, at the 2010 Silverstone Grand Prix, Helmut Marko sat him down and told him he would no longer be part of the driver academy. Hartley says he feels no real malice towards the situation. Marko was right, he was missing some performance, but really it felt like a big relief. He was released. He was in control again. After being released from Red Bull mid-year, realistically he was on the cusp of going home. He had no money, no ride, but he couldn't accept that. He talked to advisor Peter Johnson back home, and he told him to write the contact information of everyone he had on a whiteboard and start making phone calls. His contacts led him to a weekend in Formula Renault and his debut in GP2, where he would get points in his 4th and final race of the season. In 2011, he would get 3 podiums with Gravity Charouz Racing in the Renault 3.5 season, and finished the year in GP2 with 4 races with Ocean Racing Technology, with a best finish of 5th. However, more importantly, he joined Mercedes F1 as a test and sim development driver. He would spend 3 to 4 years with the team working on future development, and said his time there really renewed his love for motorsports. With them, he felt like a valued team member. Brendon would rejoin Ocean Racing for 4 races in the 2012 GP2 season, getting points in 1. His sim work with Mercedes also earned him a test day in the W03 at Magny Cours towards the end of the year. His opportunities with Mercedes were good enough to keep him afloat in Europe, and at the suggestion of good friend Sebastian Buemi, he was encouraged to check out the LMP2 class in endurance racing. He contacted a team and showed up for the official LMP2 test day at Paul Ricard. With helmet in hand, he walked up and down the paddock talking to teams, introducing himself. For a sum of money paid to the team he came with, he got a set of tires and 30 laps on track. Fortunately, his performance attracted the attention of someone he had spoken to that day. A few weeks later, he did his first endurance race at Spa for Irishman Greg Murphy, and a few months later he did his first 24 Hours of Le Mans. He fell in love with endurance racing nearly instantly, and the atmosphere at the 24 Hours of Le Mans was much more electric than anything he'd ever done before. In his 5 races that year, he got a podium at the 6 Hours of Donington. While working with Mercedes and living in Milton Keynes, he spent a lot of 2012 and 13 competing in historical racing in a variety of cars in the Goodwood Revival Race Series. He spent another year with the Murphy prototype team in LMP2, getting 2 podiums and a win in the European Le Mans Series. He also competed with the Starworks Motorsports team in the Grand Am Rolex Series in the States, where he would get a podium at the 6 Hours of Watkins Glen and overall win at the VisitFlorida.com Sports Car 250 at Road America in Wisconsin, which isn't Florida. Going into 2014, the Porsche LMP1 team was looking for a young driver with some experience, and with his association to Mercedes F1, 2 previous 24 Hours of Le Mans, and time in the USA, Brendon was their match. His first year earned 3 podium finishes in the FIA World Endurance Championship, and saw Hartley learning how to work in a professional, big-budget factory team. The next year was much of the same: Daytona 24 with the Starworks team, and another year in the WEC with Porsche. However, the team took a step forwards. Retirement in the first race, then 3rd at Spa, 2nd at Le Mans, and then 4 straight victories. The last race in Bahrain would be the only finishing race where they weren't on the podium. Hartley, along with teammates Timo Bernhard and Mark Webber, would win the championship in the top class. 2016 started a little different, as he would do the Daytona 24 with Chip Ganassi. In the WEC, it started with bad luck, a retirement in race 1, then 16th after starting on pole, 10th at Le Mans, and then victory, 3rd place victory, 3rd place to finish the year. However, the damage from the start of the year was too great, and they would finish 4th in the championship. 2017 was a big year for Hartley. Victory in the 24 Hours of Dubai, finally got the elusive win at the 24 Hours of Le Mans alongside childhood friend fellow Kiwi Earl Bamber. Alongside Earl and Timo, they would win the Drivers' Championship again, only being off the podium once that year in Fuji. He also did Daytona and Sebring in the DPI class in the IMSA series, and finished the season by winning the Petit Le Mans, winning both the Big and Little Le Mans in the same year. However, halfway through the season, Brendon was caught off guard as Porsche announced the end of their endurance program at year's end. Like he had done years before, he started making phone calls again. His connections with Chip Ganassi had him lined up to take a ride with one of the powerhouse teams in IndyCar in 2018. However, he also called up former boss Helmut Marko. He left the team without burning any bridges, and told Helmut he was a more experienced driver now, and if they needed a driver in the future, consider him. Brendon thinks Helmut respected his achievements since leaving Red Bull, because 2 weeks later he called and wanted to get him into an F1 sim. A week after that, he was heading to fill in for Pierre Gasly at the US Grand Prix, becoming the first Kiwi in F1 in 33 years. He qualified 17th, started 19th, and finished 13th in his first race, and would then go on to replace Danny Kvyat in the last 3 races of the year after Gasly returned. When he had called Red Bull, he expected sim work or a test driver role, not a second shot at F1. Instead, for 2018, he was signed for a full year with the Toro Rosso team, and as such exercised a clause in his contract to be released from IndyCar. Over the whole season, he experienced a slew of bad luck, mechanical failures, missed opportunities, and finishes just outside of the points. He would get 3 points finishes, his first coming just the 4th race. However, by race 6, there were already rumors in the media and paddock about his future. He remembers walking back to his apartment in Monaco, looking at the walls and thinking if he hit any that weekend, his F1 time could be over. Constantly looking over his shoulder wasn't something he was accustomed to, but he could only give his best effort. He put in some good sessions, was doing a solid job, and then on Sunday was taken out from behind. He He says he always had the support of the Toro Rosso team, but an hour after the Abu Dhabi GP, he was called to a meeting, and a few minutes in, he was no longer an F1 driver. He says much wasn't said at the meeting, but by what was said, it was clear there were plans to move him along ever since Monaco. Looking at his time in F1, Hartley is proud of what he's done, proud of his career, proud of his support team that got him there, and proud of his Toro Rosso team for always trying their best. After leaving F1 a second time, there were a ton of phone calls and offers. He became one of Ferrari's F1 simulator development drivers, worked with Porsche developing their upcoming Formula E project, finished third in the 1,000 miles of Sebring with S&P Racing, and then the next day finished third with the Mustang Sampling's IMSA team in the 12 hours of Sebring. Towards the end of the year, he joined the Geox Dragon Formula E team, where he completed half the season before going on to replace Fernando Alonso at Toyota Gazoo Racing in the WEC. That year, the car would get 2 overall victories and finish second in all other races, finishing 5 points behind their sister car in the championship. He picked up right where he left off in endurance racing, finishing second in the championship in 2021 and first while winning Le Mans in 2022. Currently, he will be back with Toyota in the Endurance Championship in 2023, a series he never really thought about as a kid but has come to love more than anything else. He says he doesn't really have any career goals or objectives going forwards because he knows how quickly careers can change and end from one week to the next. Racing has always been about fun for him and his family, and as long as he's having fun, he's going to keep turning laps. Hi there, and thanks for watching. Now, this video took me a little bit longer to make, which I expected because I'm using a new program, but I also had a lot of other unexpected stuff occur that slowed me down. However, going forwards, I'm hoping to make videos a bit quicker and a bit more cinematic. And speaking of cinematic, my next video is about a driver who's from a series that's always trying to force a cinematic Hollywood blockbuster storyline, whether it needs one or not. And my subject is someone who both he and his boss have been a bit frustrated by some of the choices of the governing body recently. So if you want to see the origins of who's behind the smoke and fireworks, then please consider subscribing and coming back later. But until then, I'll see you next time on Driver Profiles.